So thank you so much for this invitation, even on a short notice, just to talk a little bit about 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. Like Harold mentioned, I know this is a topic that's personal to many of us. It's also affected both sides of my family. I've had two grandparents, one on each side, pass away from Alzheimer's disease, and I have an uncle living with it right now. So I've seen how devastating it can be. And we know that it's particularly devastating in Black communities. And as a way to address that, the Alzheimer's Association actually has a national partnership with Alpha Phi Alpha to promote brain health and support families through education and awareness on a national level. In fact, Pam will know, I was just speaking to Dr. Carl Hill on Monday, who is the kind of national director of diversity, equity, inclusion, who helps put together these partnerships. And so he was really excited to hear that we'd have an opportunity to talk to a local chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha and spread some awareness. So what we're hoping to do tonight is talk about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. Hopefully by the end of today's program, everyone should be able to describe some typical age-related thinking and memory changes that happen in most people as we get older, as well as recognize some common warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, and be able to discuss some tips for approaching someone about memory concerns, and also be able to talk about the importance of early detection and the benefits of getting an accurate diagnosis. And also, we'll talk briefly about some possible tests and assessments in the process of getting a diagnosis and end with some resources available through the Alzheimer's Association. So to jump off, we've probably all heard the terms dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And I know that before I really got into this field, this was something that was often used interchangeably. And in fact, I forgot to introduce myself. I should probably start with that for those who are in the room who I haven't met yet. But before I go any further, I'm Dr. Jeremy Grant, and I'm a neuropsychologist in the Department of Psychology at Ohio State University. So thanks so much for inviting me here. And I say that to say that, yeah, I've now been studying Alzheimer's disease professionally for really certainly making it my full focus for at least the past 6 years, but broadly, probably a little bit over 10, 12 years. And before I got into this, yeah, I didn't really understand the differences between Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and these other terms that we see on the screen. So I just want to start with the term dementia. We think of dementia as an umbrella term to describe any kind of memory loss or other change in thinking abilities that is severe enough to interfere with daily life. So when someone experiences a change in their thinking or memory, and then they're not able to manage their lives independently, they're not able to drive or work or manage their finances or manage their appointments, they need help, they rely on someone else. That's when we say that someone has progressed to the dementia stage. And so there are different diseases that lead to dementia, and the most common one is what we call Alzheimer's disease. And there are some other diseases that I want to mention briefly because they're often related. You can also have dementia if you have vascular changes, if you have changes in the blood, the way that blood or nutrients get to your brain, or some change in the blood vessels in your brain via a stroke or perhaps mini strokes. That can also lead to dementia. There's also dementia with Lewy bodies, where a specific type of substance builds up in the brain and that are called Lewy bodies and has a unique set of symptoms. That's what, if you're familiar, that's what Robin Williams, the actor, had. Frontotemporal dementia, that is marked by a loss of brain cells. Got my little brain model here, hopefully that you all can see. That is marked by a loss of brain cells kind of in the front part of the brain, rather than other parts of the brain that are involved in Alzheimer's disease. And that's what the leading hypothesis is that people like Bruce Willis most recently or Wendy Williams may have been affected by. And then there's other forms of dementia as well, and also mixed dementias. You can have more than one type of disease happening in your brain that is leading to dementia. And so, yeah, we're going to focus on Alzheimer's disease this evening, which is the most common one. So on the screen right now, I'm going to show you two brains, two different brains. One of these is a normal brain, and the other is a brain of someone with Alzheimer's disease. Which kind of the peaks of the brain. That there's a lot more separation, and that indicates that there's been a loss of brain cells, and that the different parts of the brain are not touching each other. They're not as closely packed together. They're not communicating as well with one another. And so that's one of the signs that we see, particularly after someone has died. This is what a person's brain will often look like with Alzheimer's. And so, what we want to focus on discussing tonight is how those brain changes show up in day-to-day life. What some common signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease are. And we're going to go through 10 of them. Some of them are very common, some of them are a little bit more rare and associated with other forms of diseases, in addition to Alzheimer's. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what kind of changes you might see in a person with Alzheimer's disease, as well as a similar but normal age-related change. What a kind of related or common symptom that's related in that domain might be. So we don't want you to walk away from this presentation thinking that any and every memory problem that you're experiencing is due to Alzheimer's disease. We know that as people get older, it is very, very common for different thinking and memory abilities to decline, at least slightly. But there are more severe signs that can be related to Alzheimer's disease or other diseases that lead to dementia. So the first one I want to talk about is memory loss that disrupts daily life. This is the telltale sign for Alzheimer's disease, the most common symptom that we think of, that when a person has difficulty forgetting important dates or events, where they're asking the same questions over and over, where they're increasingly relying on memory aids or family members to do things that they used to manage with ease, because they're just not able to remember as much anymore. Those are all signs of an atypical memory problem. Now, a typical age-related memory change might be things like, just forgetting people's names from time to time, or forgetting appointments, if you didn't write it down, but the key here is that oftentimes, in a regular age-related change, the person is able to remember it later. It might not come to you immediately, but it might come back to you a little bit later. It might come back to you when you're driving away in the car or the next day. But when it's truly, truly lost, and then that information isn't there anymore, that's really a telltale sign of Alzheimer's disease. I can remember doing an evaluation on a patient that we diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And at the end of the evaluation, she asked the question, as she should, and as her family members were there as well. What's the treatment plan? What are the next steps? And we spent probably the next 20 minutes talking about here are all the next steps that we think you should take. And at the end of talking to her for about 20, maybe 30 minutes, you know what she asked? So what's the treatment plan? What are the next steps? It's like that. It's like those 30 minutes didn't even happen. Asking the same questions over and over again, that is a telltale sign that the disease has already started and it's definitely affecting someone's brain. I'm going to go on to the next common sign and symptom, and I'll pause in a moment to see if you have any questions. The next common sign of Alzheimer's disease: challenges in planning or solving problems, difficulties with problem solving, difficulties with things like following a familiar recipe or keeping track of bills, difficulty concentrating or taking much longer to complete tasks, particularly tasks that a person has done for a long time. Sometimes we call these difficulties with executive functioning. We like to think of your brain or there's certain abilities in your brain that we classify as kind of higher order, or your brain's kind of executive system, your brain's ability to organize information. So, for example, we might see someone who not only are they relying more and more on lists or on writing things down, but their notes aren't organized. The notes don't even make sense, not even to them. That there's a problem with their brain's ability to organize or problem solve or kind of figure out information. And so it's normal as we get older to make occasional errors with managing finances or occasional financial transactions or household bills. But when you're not able to catch those errors anymore, or you're not able to make sense of something that you did, that's when it's a really, really a dangerous sign that something more nefarious could be going on. The next symptom we want to talk about is difficulty completing familiar tasks. So people living with dementia often have difficulty completing daily tasks, as we mentioned before. So a big one is driving. I'll always ask people in an evaluation, does the person have any difficulty driving, particularly, not just to new places, but to places that they've driven for a long time? And I'll hear it all the time from patients who say that yeah, my dad, used to, work at the store down the street and now can't even get there without getting lost, or, used to drive for work all the time and now has difficulty going to familiar places. That can be a telltale sign. Or something like, yeah, I used to send my mom to, pick up groceries for us, and now she can't do it anymore. She can't seem to make sense of the list, or she brings back things that aren't on the list, or things that or misses things that were right there written for her. So not being able to complete those familiar tasks. Or often we'll ask people, what do you do in your spare time? What's your favorite game? And we'll hear stories from people who say, yeah, my dad used to play Scrabble or do crossword puzzles or play dominoes and now can't do that anymore. Those abilities that we do for fun for many, many years, when you're not able to do those anymore, that can be a really big telltale sign. And a typical thing that happens with aging, occasional difficulties needing help to use, very, detailed settings, or particularly with new technologies that come out. Those are typical as we get older. But it's when you're not able to do something that you've done for many, many years. That's when we become concerned that a biological change may be happening. Number four, confusion with time or place. We know that people living with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia may have trouble understanding if something is currently happening or if it happened in the past, or they may be confused about where they are or how they got there. And that's something that we know can typically become more pronounced in the middle or later phases of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And a typical age-related change could be things like I don't know about you, but when I'm not working, when I'm on vacation, when I'm out and about, or yeah, away from my work, I never know what it is, right? I never know, is it a Monday or Tuesday when I'm out on a vacation? But I always know how to find out about the date, or what day of the week it is, what month or what day it is. But when that person is not able to figure that out, they're not able, like, have patients in my room, not even remember how to use a calendar, not even remember, they're able to look at a clock, but they can't even tell the time correctly, something that they've been doing once again for many, many years. That can be a sign of biological change. The next sign that I want to talk about is trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So for some people, having vision problems can be a sign of Alzheimer's disease or dementia. And this is a more rare kind of symptom. Usually, it's memory problems that are predominant, but there's other forms of Alzheimer's disease where vision problems are the first change. I remember doing an evaluation on a woman whose husband brought her in because she at her church she was always bumping into the pews when she was trying to walk to the front. Like, she couldn't walk straight when going up to the front of the church. She couldn't sing in the choir anymore because she just couldn't figure out her way to walk. Her husband would have to kind of hold her arm and guide her, almost as if she was blind, or something. So he did like many families do, and took her to the eye doctor. And the eye doctor said, your eyes are just fine. You need to go see a neurologist. And they got a brain scan, and it showed that the part of the brain that controls vision, which is typically the back of the brain, that there was a severe loss of brain cells like we saw in those pictures. And so that was the more visual variant of Alzheimer's disease, where the loss of brain cells happens there first, and that can result in, being clumsy, difficulties with balance, problems judging distances, or determining color or contrast between colors, or even difficulties with reading. And so it's important to, I'm not going to say not have your vision evaluated because we know that with age, that cataracts and other kinds of eye problems are normal, or I should say are common. But if a person's eyes are normal, but they're still experiencing these problems, that's when we begin to suspect a visual variant of Alzheimer's disease.